On September 17, 2025, the uneasy calm that had settled over Eastern Europe was shattered in an instant. For months, tension had simmered just beneath the surface, but that morning, the world awoke to a new and dangerous reality. Russian drones previously confined to the battlefields of Ukraine crossed into NATO territory, specifically Romania and Poland. What had once seemed like a distant threat was now a direct and undeniable incursion into the heart of the alliance. Multiple drones crashed or were intercepted by NATO air defenses, their twisted wreckage smoldering in open fields and dense forests. Emergency responders rushed to the scene, searching for clues and ensuring the safety of local residents. This was no accident, it was a calculated provocation, a deliberate test of NATO's resolve. Military analysts and news anchors alike struggled to grasp the full implications as the story unfolded in real time. The Kremlin quickly denied any responsibility, attempting to shift blame onto Ukraine. But NATO's radar data and the unmistakable markings on the drone debris told a very different story, one that pointed directly to Moscow's involvement. In response, local authorities scrambled to assess the threat. Emergency meetings were called in Bucharest and Warsaw, as government officials worked late into the night, coordinating with NATO and raising security alerts across the region. The psychological shock was immediate and profound. For decades, NATO's Article 5, the promise that an attack on one is an attack on all, had been a theoretical safeguard. Now, it was being tested in the real world. The war, once confined to the east, had arrived on NATO's very doorstep. Soldiers were deployed to guard key facilities, and armored vehicles patrolled rural roads, their presence a stark reminder of the new reality. The drones, each laden with explosives, carried a chilling message. Russia was willing to risk direct confrontation with the world's most powerful military alliance. Intelligence analysts pored over blueprints, searching for patterns and weaknesses. Moscow was probing NATO's limits, daring the alliance to respond. In command centers across Europe, officers monitored the situation, aware that every decision could have far-reaching consequences. The world watched, breath held, as images of drone fragments flashed across global news broadcasts. These broken machines became symbols of a security order in crisis, their twisted metal a warning to all. This act, small in scale but enormous in consequence, was the spark that threatened to ignite a much wider war. Border checkpoints grew tense, and military convoys rumbled through quiet villages. The question was no longer if NATO would respond, but how and how soon. In capitals across the continent, world leaders held urgent phone calls, weighing their options and the risks of escalation. The borderlands of Europe braced for what might come next. Villagers boarded up windows, and soldiers fortified checkpoints, preparing for the unknown. The fragile peace that had endured for years was gone, replaced by a new and dangerous uncertainty. In homes across Eastern Europe, anxious residents watched the news, wondering what the next day would bring. The stage was set for a confrontation that could reshape not just the region, but the entire continent. The world stood at a crossroads, its future hanging in the balance. NATO's response was swift and resolute, a testament to decades of preparation and unity among its member states. As the first reports of the crisis reached Brussels, alarms sounded in command centers across Europe and North America, signaling the start of a coordinated response unlike any seen in recent history. Within hours, the North Atlantic Council convened an emergency session, bringing together ambassadors and military leaders from all 31 member nations. The atmosphere was tense, but there was no hesitation. Every representative understood the gravity of the moment. The message from Brussels was clear and unequivocal. A red line had been crossed, and the alliance would respond as one. The world watched as NATO officials addressed the press, their statements leaving no room for doubt. Fighter jets from the US, UK, Germany, and France surged into the skies over Eastern Europe, their engines roaring as they established air superiority. The sight of Allied aircraft flying in tight formation sent a powerful signal to both allies and adversaries. Advanced air defense systems, Patriot and SAMP-T, were rapidly deployed to Poland and Romania, creating a protective shield over vulnerable regions. These high-tech systems stood ready to intercept any threat, reassuring local populations and NATO partners alike. NATO's rapid reaction forces went on high alert, with thousands of troops mobilizing and moving swiftly to reinforce the eastern flank. Soldiers from across the alliance geared up, prepared for any contingency. Convoys of armor rolled through Poland and Finland, a visible show of strength and solidarity. The movement of tanks and armored vehicles at dawn underscored NATO's readiness to defend its members at a moment's notice. the alliance shifted from deterrence to active defense, fortifying positions and establishing new checkpoints along the border. Every inch of NATO territory was to be secured, with troops working tirelessly to strengthen defenses. The response was strong but measured, calibrated to deter further aggression without escalating the crisis uncontrollably. Commanders coordinated closely, ensuring discipline and restraint even as patrols increased. Leaders in Brussels and Washington understood the stakes. A direct clash could mean global catastrophe. Every decision was weighed carefully, balancing the need for strength with the imperative to avoid all-out war. The era of ambiguity was over. NATO's resolve was now unmistakable. The alliance stood united, its commitment to collective defense stronger than ever before. Moscow was put on notice. The alliance would not back down, and any further provocation would be met with overwhelming force. The message was received loud and clear. The world's most powerful military bloc was now on a war footing, its forces mobilized and its intentions unmistakable. The world held its breath, watching as history unfolded in real time. In response to NATO's growing involvement and support for Ukraine, Russia unleashed a devastating new wave of attacks, escalating the conflict to levels not seen before. The skies over Ukraine lit up with the fiery trails of missiles and artillery, as Russian forces intensified their campaign with a ferocity that shocked the world. Major cities, Kyiv, Odessa, Pavlograd, became battlegrounds overnight, hammered by relentless barrages of missiles and swarms of drones. Air raid sirens wailed through the night, sending families scrambling for shelter as explosions shattered the silence and fires raged across city blocks. The bombardment was not limited to the front lines. Russia's strategy targeted Ukraine's critical infrastructure, power grids, railways, logistics depots, and even chemical plants, crippling the nation's ability to move troops, supply its people, and maintain daily life. The goal was clear: to paralyze Ukraine's war effort, sow chaos, and terrorize its people into submission. But instead of breaking their spirit, the attacks forced civilians to band together, supporting each other in the darkest hours. Missiles even struck near Western embassies in Kiev, sending a chilling message to the international community that no one was beyond reach, and that the stakes of this war were global. Emergency services raced against time, struggling to keep up as they pulled survivors from the rubble and rushed the wounded to safety, their courage shining through the chaos. These attacks were designed to break Ukraine's will, to force surrender through fear and exhaustion. Yet, in the face of devastation, the Ukrainian people found new strength, their resolve hardening with every strike. The Ukrainian spirit held firm. Soldiers and civilians alike refused to capitulate, standing together in defiance, holding candlelit vigils, and helping neighbors rebuild shattered lives. Russia's fury only fueled a desperate and innovative Ukrainian counteroffensive. Makeshift barricades sprang up, and drone operators adapted quickly, turning adversity into opportunity on the battlefield. The war's brutality reached new heights, but so did Ukraine's determination. Exhausted soldiers and civilians worked side by side, clearing rubble and defending their homes, refusing to let despair take hold. The world watched as a nation under siege refused to break. Families huddled in subway stations, children clutched flags, and hope persisted amid the ruins. As nighttime explosions lit up the horizon and military commanders braced for what was to come, it was clear: the conflict was entering its most dangerous and unpredictable phase yet. Ukraine struck back with ingenuity and precision. Lacking Russia's missile stockpiles, Ukraine launched asymmetric drone and missile attacks deep into Russian-held territory. Their main targets, Russian air defenses, especially S-400 systems in Crimea and along the border. Each strike opened new gaps in Russia's shield, exposing its forces. The Black Sea Fleet, once dominant, was battered by Ukrainian sea drones and forced to retreat. The Kerch Bridge was hit again, disrupting Russian logistics. Ukrainian drones targeted Russian oil refineries, igniting fires from the Black Sea to deep inside Russia. These attacks crippled fuel supplies and slashed Kremlin revenues. Ukraine proved it could impose real costs on the aggressor, bringing the war home to Russia. The message was clear: Ukraine would not be a victim, it would fight back. As the war raged, Russia ramped up its propaganda machine. State media boasted of battlefield victories, exaggerating minor gains to boost morale. These claims often coincided with setbacks or Ukrainian strikes, distracting from bad news. The Kremlin's goal: control the narrative, maintain public support, and suppress dissent. In a throwback to the past, Russia resurrected Viktor Yanukovych, Ukraine's ousted pro-Russian president. He appeared in Russian media, calling for peace and blaming the West. Moscow presented him as a leader in exile, hinting at plans for a puppet regime. For Ukrainians, Yanukovych's return only strengthened their resolve to resist. The propaganda campaign revealed Russia's desperation and miscalculation. As the conflict escalated, Putin sought new alliances. Russia deepened ties with Serbia and drew Slovakia closer, fracturing European unity. The most crucial partnership was with China, which provided economic lifelines and helped Russia bypass sanctions. The Power of Siberia 2 pipeline deal cemented this new axis, redirecting Russian energy to Asia. Moscow and Beijing coordinated their messaging, blaming NATO and calling for a new world order. This alignment gave Russia political cover and complicated Western efforts to isolate the Kremlin. The world was splitting into rival blocs, with Ukraine as the central battleground. The war was no longer just European, it was global. The West responded with military and economic escalation. NATO's buildup in Poland and Finland turned the Baltic into a NATO stronghold. Massive joint exercises signaled readiness to defend every inch of alliance territory. The UK took a bold step, seizing frozen Russian assets to fund Ukraine's defense and reconstruction. Moscow raged, calling it theft and threatening retaliation. The move set a precedent. If other G7 nations followed, it could cripple Russia's war finances. The economic war was now as fierce as the military one. The stakes had never been higher for both sides. The balance of power was shifting, fast. The war's technological arms race accelerated. Russia unleashed hypersonic missiles and waves of kamikaze drones, overwhelming Ukrainian defenses. In the Black Sea, Ukrainian sea drones hunted Russian warships, blockading the fleet in port. Ukrainian drones struck oil refineries deep inside Russia, causing fuel shortages and economic turmoil. Each side raced to innovate, seeking any edge. The battlefield became a proving ground for unmanned systems and next-generation weapons. The intensity and sophistication of the fighting reached new heights. The risk of uncontrollable escalation grew with every strike. The region teetered on the edge of a wider conflict. By late September 2025, the war had become a global crisis. Tensions soared as Russian jets harassed NATO aircraft, risking deadly miscalculations. Georgia, under Moscow's sway, offered its territory for Russian operations, threatening a new front. Western embassies worldwide faced attacks and protests, orchestrated to intimidate and isolate. Hybrid warfare blurred the lines between battlefield and home front. The conflict metastasized, drawing in new actors and domains. What began as a war over Ukraine now threatened the global order. The world stood at the brink, haunted by the specter of nuclear confrontation. The showdown of September 2025 left humanity wondering, was it already too late to step back? The fate of peace hung by a thread.